This is my review of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Okay, so in this episode we see the finale to the quote-unquote fight with Cheap Trick. And we also the whole little side story about Hayato investigating his dad finally comes to a head in this episode. So it starts off with Koichi arriving at Rohan's house, and Koichi is understandably a little confused, pointing out that Rohan just kind of called him out of the blue and didn't really explain any of what was going on with him. And understandably wants to know what exactly is going on. And Rohan just kind of tells him straight that he has an enemy stand on his back and that he's not allowed to show Koichi or he'll die. So, and understandably Koichi is a little bit confused and thinks that Rohan is messing with him because while he does at first seem to be a little surprised and a little bit worried for his friend's well-being when he discovers that there's an enemy stand attacking him, he starts to believe that Rohan is actually just messing with him when Rohan can't actually show him the stand and prove that definitively that he is being attacked by it. So understandably, Rohan tries to find concrete evidence that proves that he's being attacked. So in order to find some actual concrete evidence to actually prove that he's actually being attacked by a stand, he leads Koichi upstairs to where Mr. Kanoto was and where he was killed by his own stand. And also he spiders his way up the stairs so that Koichi can actually get past him. Only to be thrown for a loop when he actually discovers Kanoto's body and discovers that it is actually shrunken in size significantly to the size of a doll, due to it having his vitality drained by Cheap Trick. And that's more than enough for Koichi to write it off as a joke because he believes that Rohan just kind of sculpted the little figurine himself. And decides that Rohan is definitively messing with him and decided to investigate him because he thought something might have happened to him. But if all Rohan is doing is messing with him, that he doesn't want any part of it. And this is despite Rohan's protest that he's actually telling the truth and being completely 100% serious with Koichi. And even pointing out that he values Koichi as a friend and that he specifically called him because he doesn't feel like Yoshikage or Kira would offer to help. So... But regardless of all of Rohan's protesting, Koichi does in fact leave, and Rohan is forced to come up with a plan B while Cheap Trick kind of goads him into trying to burn the pictures. So at which point Rohan decides that the next best solution is to go to the Morio Grand Hotel and show Jotaro what's going on, and try to get Jotaro's help by showing him the pictures. So with that, he then leaves the house. With his photo album in his knapsack, and then proceeds to go through the streets of Morio in an effort to actually get to where he needs to go. However, problems then begin to arise when he discovers that he needs to actually cross the crosswalk to get where he wants to go. So and sure enough, Cheap Trick points out that he won't be able to cross it because even if he can hide his back against a bunch of walls and a bunch of other things, he's not going to be able to hide his back in an open street, and that he should just give up and burn the pictures. However, Rohan merely remarks that he has it on good authority that Kanoto would have had to have crossed the street several times in order to get to his house. So he just has to figure out how he did it. And sure enough, he eventually figures out that if he has his back pressed up against another person across the street, then he doesn't need to actually show anyone his back because he'll have his back to someone else's back and nobody will be able to see it. And while Cheap Trick commends Rohan on his ingenuity and actually figuring out a way to avoid people seeing his back, Rohan, he also points out that he wasn't able to mess with Kanoto before because he wasn't fully manifested because Kanoto didn't have the willpower to fully manifest Cheap Trick. But now that Cheap Trick is fully manifested, he can actually mess with people and get them to look at him. And sure enough, tries to goad the guy that Rohan currently has his back pressed against into a fight, and tries to get him to turn around and look at his back so that Rohan will be forced to transfer Cheap Trick to somebody else. However, while he points out that Rohan does point out that Cheap Trick is very capable in actually getting people to look at him. He also points out that Kanoto didn't have another stand to help him, and sure enough, summons door and forces the guy to continue looking forward to where he is and he can't look back behind him for a full minute. So with that, Rohan is able to actually stop the guy from turning around. And as he's walking, he actually tells Cheap Trick that he admires Cheap Trick's efforts, but that if his only ability is talking, and he's not going to be any match for him, and that there's no way he's actually going to be able to defeat Rohan. Although the way Rohan puts it, it makes it seem like he's talking to the guy that he's currently has his back pressed against, which starts to annoy the guy, and eventually, once he's able to turn around again, he goes to confront Rohan, but Rohan is nowhere to be seen. So, yeah, Rohan plays the pronoun game, which pisses off the guy he's trying to hide his back against. So, but he never actually sees the man, nor does he see where he went. So the guy never confronts Rohan. But in any case, Rohan continues on his merry way, continuing to have his back pressed against the wall so that nobody can see it. And eventually, he sees a dog and a cat, and Cheap Trick then proceeds to ask him if Heaven's Door will actually work on the animals. And Rohan responds that they absolutely will if they have any higher intelligence. But as he's going through the alleyway where he is, he actually notices that there's an unusual amount of animals gathering in the area. And sure enough, Cheap Trick responds that he actually called them because, as it turns out, while Cheap Trick's only ability is to talk, he can communicate with basically anything he wants. And sure enough, he used his abilities to tell the animals that Rohan hates animals. And because of that, the animals will be able to attack him. And eventually see his back, enabling Cheap Trick to move on and attach himself to one of the animals, which in turn will make it a lot easier for him to transfer to somebody else's back, since they don't have a high enough intelligence to actually shield their back from somebody else. So. Yeah, and sure enough, Rohan gets attacked by all the animals at once, and he's unable to actually defend himself. He tries and fails, but yeah, as it turns out, he doesn't have to, because Koichi actually shows up out of the blue and to save Rohan, and scares off all the animals with Echo Zack 3. So, and at which point Rohan is moved to tears because he realizes that Koichi does care about him as a friend after all. And Koichi responds that apparently he's been following Rohan around the whole time, pointing out that he originally believed that Rohan was messing with him and that he initially was going to just write it off as Rohan trying to screw with him. But after a while, he decided to go back and apologize to Rohan and for not believing in him. At which point he saw Rohan doing all of the things he's done up to this point, and quickly realizes that since Rohan was doing all of those jokey things outside of his own home, that he most likely wasn't lying about being attacked by an enemy stand, and then decides to help him. And actually comes up with an idea that if the stand is on his back, that all he needs to do is attack it and remove it with his own ability. And so Koichi uses Echo Zack 3 to actually try and remove Cheap Trick from Rohan's back using 3 freeze. And while it initially seems to be successful because Cheap Trick starts to get heavy and starts to fall off, that Rohan's back then starts to bleed, and Rohan quickly realizes that if Echo Zack 3 continues to be used on him, it will cause more further damage. And Cheap Trick basically confirms this. Cheap Trick is quick to point out that he's using his own ability to pin himself to Rohan's back instead of brute strength, and that if Rohan continues to do it to have Echo Zack 3 pull him off, that he's going to only just damage his own back and kill himself that way. So Rohan tells Koichi to call off Echo Zack 3 and explain what's going on, and it doesn't take much convincing because Koichi can see the blood leaking from Rohan's back and quickly realizes that he's hurting Rohan and calls off Echo Zack 3 to stop and tells it to stop. So, and Echo Zack 3 complies and turns off 3 freeze. At which point, Cheap Trick goads that he really is out of options and that he should just give up and burn the pictures, or better yet, have it show his back to somebody else, and that's because it's only a matter of time before he does that. And sure enough, once Rohan gets to, and sure enough, once Rohan eventually decides that he is going to show his back to Koichi, which sounds completely out of character until you realize what's happening. So yeah, Rohan decides to show Koichi his back because unaware of any of the parties that nearby except for Rohan, they actually wound up in Ghost Girl's alley, and case in point, the reason he's showing his back to Koichi is because they're in the alleyway where they're not supposed to turn around no matter what, and due to Cheap Trick's nature of how it works, once he shows his back to Koichi, Cheap Trick turns into the alley. Sure enough, Cheap Trick nearly goes at it one, but realizes too late what Rohan has actually done, and Rohan then proceeds to explain what he did. So yeah, Cheap Trick is defeated by Ghost Girl Alley because that's the only way to safely remove it. So because as Rohan explains, they can't remove it with a stand ability because if they do, it'll affect both Rohan and the stand, and that's not going to work. So Rohan instead reveals that he was never planning to go to Morio Grand Hotel, but actually to Ghost Girl's Alley so that he could safely remove the stand without Rohan being affected in any way. And sure enough, the ghost hands from Ghost Girl's Alley grab the stand and rip it off Rohan's back. And Cheap Trick merely screams in protest, but can't really do anything else beyond that. And as it's being spirited away by the hands of Ghost Girl Alley, Rohan decides to write a message on Cheap Trick. While he doesn't really know if it'll actually work, he uses the stand to tell his own stand to tell Cheap Trick to go to hell. Again, he doesn't really know if it'll work, but he does it anyway, and Cheap Trick after that point disappears. At which point Rohan and Koichi emerge from Ghost Girl's Alley. And Koichi compliments Rohan on his brilliant strategy to use Ghost Girl's Alley to defeat the stand. But as they're contemplating how they're actually going to try and warn the rest of the Joestar group about what's going on. As it turns out, they don't have to do much because as it turns out, Reimi Sugimoto is actually shows up and during the struggle, his Rohan's photo album actually fell out of his knapsack. And as it fell out of the knapsack, it opened to the page of Yoshikage Kira's new identity, which Reimi is able to positively identify to be him because she notices that something is very strange about the pictures that Rohan has taken. So it's implied that Reimi Sugimoto is able to actually deduce what her murderer actually looks like. But in any case, there's actually another side plot to this that kind of happens in the middle of Rohan's thing, but mostly happens after. So as Rohan is dealing with Cheap Trick, Yoshikage Kira again decides to Kasako Kawajiri. He's riding on the train going on a commute and is contemplating whether or not he should kill some of the girls in there, but ultimately decides against it because they don't really fit his tastes. And points out that he's looking for a girl to fit his tastes before he decides to kill them. And as it turns out, the perfect girl just kind of lands in his lap. There's this very rude couple that are chatting away next to Rohan. She points out that and it's clear that the woman is very openly not nice. She points out that she sneaks out at night just to get her dad riled up, and that she even steals some things so that he'll notice and follow her. And as she's talking, her bag actually lands on Kira's leg, and Kira pushes it off because it's bothering him. Only for them to criticize him for trying to steal her purse, and then proceed to leave the train. And as they're doing that, they bump into Kira again, who drops his bag, and his bowling pin nail clippers fall out, and they merely mock him for his weird taste in nail clippers, and then proceed to go back to their apartment. And unknown to either of them, Kira actually follows them, and as she's discussing whether or not her boyfriend should actually get some earrings, Yoshikage Kira actually bursts into his apartment and then proceeds to kill him with his stand before he can even react or even call the cops for breaking and entering. So at which point the woman proceeds to panic, understandably, because she just saw her boyfriend get vaporized right in front of her. And Yoshikage Kira confronts her and proceeds to ask for her name and if she'll give him the courtesy of giving it to her. And while she initially doesn't comply, pointing out that she's curious about who he is and is understandably a little bit panicked, he then responds that she shouldn't answer a question with a question, that she should know that from school. At which point she reveals her name is Minato or something along those lines. But he merely compliments her name, pointing out that she picked him a beautiful name, that she got a beautiful name from her family, and points out that he feels like he picked the right person to follow. And then asks her to trim his nails, pointing out that they grow unnaturally long, and that he wants her to trim them. And she is understandably a little bit panicked and asks for his forgiveness. And he merely responds that he's not angry, but rather that he does this because he likes to, and that he's actually more than a little turned on, as we would put it. So, and then he also remarks that she was having an argument with her boyfriend about earrings, and that he actually left behind a pair for her. And as it's revealed, he actually turned her boyfriend's ears into a pair of earrings and hangs them on her ears before killing her and vaporizing her, and then taking her hand as a trophy, pointing out that she's very good at trimming nails and that he hopes they'll be happy to get together, specifically since she can now no longer talk. However, unaware to Kira this entire time, he doesn't realize that Hayato had actually followed him with a camera and has basically filmed the entire thing. He basically filmed a murder of two people who had just kind of been killed and disappeared. And Hayato understandably panics because he doesn't know what stands are up to this point. All he knows is that there's some supernatural things going on in his house at the moment, and upon seeing Kira kill two people with his stand, he concludes that Kira is in fact not human and proceeds to run the hell away. Kira hears Hayato come into the apartment and close the door. But he doesn't understand. But he doesn't know it's Hayato until he comes out, sees Hayato running away with a camera, and then puts two and two together and realizes that Hayato has likely been suspicious of him for a while now. So he decides to follow Hayato back home. And as Hayato is running back home, figuring out what he's supposed to do, he actually runs past Jotaro, who was investigating the murder of Minato. He was in the area investigating missing people, if you guys remember. So naturally, he would just be in a place where there were a bunch of missing people hanging out. So yeah, as he's running as he passes by Hayato, he actually stops at the apartment where the couple was killed. And upon seeing very little evidence other than a drop of blood, realizes that Kira has most likely made his move again, and realizes that now he needs to catch him, because he realizes now that Kira is no longer able to hold his instincts in. But eventually Hayato does return home and hides in the bathroom to actually get away from Kira and figure out what's actually going on. And as he's doing that, Kira is actually going through Hayato's stuff and quickly realizes that Hayato likely has been filming him and is planning to likely give the tape to the police or something. So he decides to go confront Hayato in the bathroom. And Hayato is understandably, and as Kira decides to do that, Hayato is actually trying to figure out who he should actually give the tape to, because as he's quick to point out, not only will they be unable to catch him due to there being very little evidence to actually convict, but he also points out that he can't really show his mother because she'll likely be killed if she finds out, and she also trusts him. And also he can't show the police because even if he wants to show, again, there's not enough evidence to convict, but even if he did, he's not sure if the police would actually be able to catch him anyway. So he's left with very little options and is unaware of what to do. So, but as he's contemplating that, Kosaku actually confronts Hayato in the bathroom and decides that they should have a father-son bonding time by bathing each other. So, and which also serves as a perfect excuse for Kira to try and to interrogate him and figure out what's going on with Hayato and try and figure out what exactly it is he's doing. So, and sure enough, throughout this entire sequence, which is kind of a little bit creepy because this guy isn't even related to Hayato, but is pretending to be his dad. And that is kind of the point, because as we've established, Yoshikage Kira is a bit of kind of a murderer, so it makes perfect sense that this would be that there would be zero boundaries for him. He actually does notice that Hayato is actually acting a little bit strangely, and sure enough, Hayato has the tape with him and is trying to hide it from Kira. But eventually, Kira does let it known that he actually saw Hayato leaving the scene, and proceeds to confront him and point out that he knows that Hayato had filmed him, and after that, Hayato completely breaks down and starts panicking. At which point Kira realizes that he was completely right about the fact that Hayato has been suspicious of him for the past couple of days, and realizing that he needs to get rid of Hayato or he's going to tell somebody. He proceeds to turn one of Hayato's hair strands into a bomb, pointing out that it'll look like an accident because it'll only blow up part of his scalp and make it look like he hit his head and died that way. So, but as he's about to use his stand to kill Hayato quickly reveals that he actually set this up as a plan from the very beginning. He planned to have Kosaku Kawajiri confront him so that he can definitively prove that he's not his dad. And sure enough, has not only reveals that he has several tapes hidden around the house that Kira will never be able to find, but in addition to that, he's actually filmed Kira's entire escapade of what's going on with his camera, so that he's unable to actually try and to be able to defeat him. So he reveals that he actually has played Kira up so that he's no longer able to actually hurt him, because not only is there now not only will there be video evidence of Kira killing him if he does, but that in addition to that, he also has several tapes in around the house that he's sure somebody who can actually help will be able to find. And Kira is understandably backed into a corner because he realizes that Hayato has basically tricked him and he can't do anything about it. So, yeah, that's it. So yeah, as I said, that little storyline comes to a head here. So yeah, that's going to be, so yeah, now everything is going to kind of fall into place for this, because now everything is in place for the heroes to go and confront Yoshikage Kira, because in addition to there being several pieces of evidence that suggest that Yoshikage Kira is pretending to be Kosaku Kawajiri, mainly recorded by Hayato, who can now use the evidence against him. Now Rohan and Koichi I specifically have evidence pointing to, or at least they will have evidence pointing to Yoshikage Kira's new identity, because they have Remy Sugimoto looking at the pictures and determining which one is actually him. And on top of that, Jotaro has actually gone to investigate the missing disappearances, and now has definitive proof that Yoshikage Kira is killing again. So yeah, everything's going to come to a head next episode, because now all of these little plot points are just going to converge into one, and now Yoshikage Kira is back into a corner because now he's attracted too much attention to himself. So yeah, Kira is going to have to go on the offensive eventually, but for right now, that's going to do it for my review of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. What did you guys think? What did you let me know in the Discord down below? Or if you want to leave me a comment, then you can also discuss it that way. But either way, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on all my social links in the description below as well, including my Discord. There's also my Patreon, my website, and a couple other things down there. So if you want to get in contact with me, then all of those are down in the description. And if you want to see more videos from me and actually see more content from me and more of what you like, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is the video recommended to you based on YouTube's watch algorithms and what you actually want to see from me. So either you watch something new or more of what you like. Either way, you get to see more content from me. But regardless of whether or not you do any or all of those things, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!